Hi everyone, this is Jim. Welcome to this Blitz chess postmortem, a postmortem of my Blitz game number 491. I had the white pieces and played d4. My opponent played d5, so I go for the Queen's Gambit declined with c4, the top choice in that position, and now my opponent plays e6, the classical way of defending. The Slav with c6 is slightly more popular these days, but still e6 is quite a respectable way to defend. So knight c3 attacking the center, knight f6 defending it. You can play bishop e7 here. I think Chess Explained recommended that as a way of avoiding immediate pins with bishop to g5. But, well, the knight here, you can pin it, and he unpins with bishop e7, but apparently you can trade pawns on d5 and maybe get some advantage for white. I've never actually played that way. In fact, I'm just experimenting with this bishop g5 move. I used to always play e3 here, which is not a top choice, or sometimes knight f3 and then e3, blocking my bishop in. So playing outside the pawn chain, I'm just trying to get experience with these positions. You have to be a little bit careful with the bishop out here. It's somewhat exposed. Maybe after c6 and queen to a5, there's threats along this diagonal, which can open up suddenly with an exchange on the, say, d takes c4, would open up that file. Or that rank, rather. So you do have to be a little bit tactically alert when you play this bishop g5 move, but it seems like an interesting way to play. Here I could continue with knight f3 or e3. I think they're equally good. He castles. I mean, my bishop is outside the pawn chain, so this e3 move is no longer closing it in. I go knight f3, and now he goes a6, which is a bit of a rare move. The main continuation here is knight b d7, just shoring up this knight, or kicking the bishop immediately with h6. Anyway, a6 is a bit of a rare move here because one of the ideas of a6 is often to take here and then support the c-pawn with the move b5. So it's kind of a threat to capture this pawn on c4. But here I can always take with the bishop immediately, so that threat doesn't exist. The other idea with this a6 move is to keep a knight out of b5, and that's not immediately a problem because black has pretty good control over these squares. Although if he moves the c-pawn and if I move my bishop to the f4 square, then maybe I can coordinate on those squares. But at the moment, it's not a problem. Or I guess I could even coordinate on c7 there if the bishop were on f4. But anyway, it seems like this move a6 is guarding against threats that don't really exist in the position, at least not yet. So not really immediately a necessary move. I just continue developing. It's interesting that the chess engine likes this exchange on d5 already. But anyway, yeah, I don't usually play that way. I just keep my pieces coming forward. And let's see, we're out of the opening book now. He kicks my bishop. And I decide to trade. It looks like the bishop doesn't have a whole lot of future over here on this side of the board. And with a closed position, the advantage, the theoretical advantage black has with the bishop pair is not so great. The pawns kind of hem in the bishop, and my knights are adequate for they're adequate, or they're comparable in value to his bishops in this position. So I castle. He goes knight d7. And, you know, I have a little more space in this position, a little better development, so slight edge to white. But his last move, actually, so we get back up, you can see slight edge to white in this position. His last move, knight d7, was actually a blunder. So if you want to stop and think about it, what's wrong with that knight d7 move? Okay, I will put it on the board. He played this. I didn't take advantage of it, but he just left his d-pawn undefended here. The knight is blocking the queen's view of the d-pawn. And after taking, if he takes back, I can take with the knight. The engine is saying he's better off just playing some other move, e5 or knight b6, giving up on the pawn. Well, e takes d5 is in the list of top possible moves. But in any case, white stays a pawn up. So I'm just winning a pawn here. One point is that after this sequence, there's no great tempo moves with the knight, so even though my knight is loose on d5, he can't really take advantage of it, so I'm just up a pawn here. In fact, my knight can always take the bishop with check in this position. So anyway, I ignored that, which is kind of a shame because it's your responsibility as a chess player to notice your opponent's mistakes and point them out to him. So I push with e4, And now he can equalize by taking the c-pawn. This is a better way to take. He probably doesn't want to sit here and let me take, but he can take either the e-pawn or the c-pawn. When he takes the e-pawn like he did in the game, that brings my knight forward with a tempo on his bishop, so that's good for white. If he takes the c-pawn, it displaces my bishop a little bit. I do have, I guess, ideas of playing e5 here, but he can throw in c5 and start counterattacking the center immediately. So this would be okay for black. Instead, he took here, and now white does get a slight edge. So I continue to have my better development and nice center control. So he goes bishop back to e7. He doesn't want to give up the bishop pair. I go rook e1, b6 now, making a square for his bishop to come out to. I go bishop c2. This typical plan in these positions, line up with the queen and the bishop and threaten checkmate, and at the very least try and create some pawn weaknesses over here on the king side. Of course, if he doesn't defend against the checkmate, go ahead and mate him. Anyway, bishop b7 and queen d3 completing this lineup. And now his best way to stop this threat on this diagonal is probably to play g6. If you give the engine time to think about it, I think it prefers the g6 move to rook e8. Rook e8 doesn't really address the threat immediately, but maybe g6 will be played later after rook e8. There's also knight here, but you can't play that, I guess, because I would exchange off the knight and then the queen comes in. But knight to f6 is a resource to keep in mind. If this knight goes anywhere, then knight to f6 defends. So I guess he's okay with rook e8. But g6 is also a way to defend and not have to worry about that threat. Instead, he played the move f5, which is a bit of a weakening move. And in particular, it left the e-pawn undefended. And so there's a way to take advantage of this with the move knight to g3. So here's your second tactical quiz, which is what happens after knight g3? Why is that a good move? Okay, well, first of all, I'll show what happened in the game. I went knight e to d2. And we'll realize the first problem here is that the pawn is under attack. It can't really move forward. I can just take it. And it can't easily be defended. The square the knight might come to, those squares that the knight might go to defend the pawn, are both blocked. So the knight can't defend it. His bishop can't defend it either. That square is covered. This bishop can't defend it. It's the wrong color. The queen and the rook are out of play and can't defend it. The only piece that can defend that pawn is this rook on f8. And the only way to defend it is to play rook f6. So that's the first thing you have to notice. And then the second thing is you think about, okay, I move the knight away and he has to play rook f6 to defend that pawn. How can I take advantage of that rook being on an awkward square? And if you think about it that way, you might notice that knight to g3 here is an interesting idea. Once again, rook f6, the only way to hold on to the pawn. And now the point of knight g3 is revealed. You can come here to h5, kick the rook again. And if the rook goes to g6 to try and hold on to the pawn, you just can drop the knight back to f4 and fork. Fork the rook and the pawn, and you're going to win the pawn anyway. So no matter what happens here, you're picking up a pawn. So anyway, that was my second chance in this game to get an advantage of at least a pawn. Instead, I played knight e to d2. The game continued rook f6. Rook a to d1, normal development. I'm keeping, a slight edge here, so not bad, but you should really take advantage of these opportunities when you have them. Although that knight g3 move, I have to admit, that's probably a little too subtle for me to pick up in a blitz game. I might notice it in a long game, but not in a blitz game. Anyway, queen to e8. And I push on with d5. This is probably a good idea. I've got my pieces all out. He hasn't really completed his development in a sense, and his pieces are somewhat awkwardly placed. So it looks like it's a good idea for me to open the position up at this point. He can't push the pawn forward. I can just take it once again. So he's looking for ways to defend the d-pawn. He tries knight c5. And now I go queen e3. The knight was hitting my queen, but also I'm lining up on this pawn, threatening to take once again. And so he decides to try and solve his problems by taking here. But I guess he didn't notice this lineup of queen and rook hitting his bishop, because this just loses a piece after e takes d5. Queen takes d5, it's pretty much game over. He tries to keep the queens on and play on for complications. I just drop back to consolidate, exchanges off this pawn, and now the dust is cleared, and basically I'm a piece up. I have an extra knight, and all he has is one extra pawn, so that's quite a strong advantage. And I still have better development. I didn't have to disorganize my pieces too badly to pick up that piece. I just did one retreating move with my queen, and everything seems to be in good shape here. So there's no real compensation for black. So the game is pretty much over. I'm just going to kind of fast forward to the rest of the moves. There was one interesting little tactic towards the end, but basically I'm just moving my pieces forward towards his king, trading them off when I have the opportunity, because the end game with an extra piece is an easy win. So that's what I'm doing. Oh yeah, and this was the tactic. So you can use these threats of trades. Your opponent doesn't want to trade, so you can use these threats of trades to push your opponent's pieces around. So I played queen f3 here. He played queen g5 to avoid the trade. And now there's this nice little fork here with the knight hitting the king and the queen. And this forces the loss of the exchange. So now I'm a whole rook up at this point. And I stay a rook up. There's a few more moves here, but I trade off the knight. And now it's just rook and queen versus queen. And at some point he resigns. Yeah, here. It's not like the end is immediate. He can struggle on, but it would be hard. It would be hard for him to turn the tables or even hold a draw in this position. So he resigned, and that's how the game ended. Hope you guys liked this video. Leave any comments you have in the section below, and I will see you again soon. Bye.